I've decided to have Mom come live with us here. My husband's sudden cohabitation announcement nearly made me drop my cup. What? You can't just spring something like that on me. It's impossible here. Mom's been suddenly left alone and is very sad. So I was thinking she could stay with us for a while. She'll move in next week. I was of course worried about my mother-in-law who had suddenly lost her husband in a car accident. But why on earth would he decide on living together without consulting me? I was angry about the sudden news, but I tried to convince myself that it would be okay for just a short while. However, to my astonishment, the following week my mother-in-law arrived with a moving company in tow. Oh. What's all this stuff? What's going on here? I sold my house because it's definitely more comfortable here. I thought, if I'm gonna move, I might as well. What? When I looked at my husband, he was grinning mischievously at me. Didn't I tell you I was going to invite Mom to live with us? This is my house. You need to obey the orders of the head of the household. Make sure you take good care of Mom. What? Head of the household. What are you talking about? This is the place I'm renting from my cousin Lisa, remember? Had my husband forgotten something that important? I know that. But right now, I'm the one paying the steep rent here. If you can't obey me, then get out of this house. Huh? Although $2,500 is just half of the rent. I wanted to argue, but I decided it was better to let them face reality squarely, so I held back what I wanted to say. I packed my belongings into a suitcase and silently decided to leave the house. This is no good. After leaving the apartment, I sighed heavily and made a phone call. I'm Sarah Johnson, 35 years old. I opened a facial spa and it's been 7 years now. I went to vocational school to become a beautician, but during my studies, my career aspirations shifted. Believing that true beauty starts with healthy skin, I decided to start my own business after years of training at a salon. My husband Kyle and I have been married for 3 years and have been living together. Kyle was a high school classmate, and we reconnected at our 10-year reunion. While chatting excitedly with friends about our obsession with natural stone bracelets at the time, Kyle cut in. If you want to boost your love luck, maybe rose quartz would be better? Why? And how do you know that? Oh, I got interested in gemstones a while back. You know, we're getting to that age where marriage and serious relationships come to mind, and I just thought rose quartz seemed promising for that. Kyle, with his hair still tousled from sleep as usual, piqued my interest with his casual remark. He was always known as bedhead among the girls at school due to his odd hair. And I knew he was indifferent to his looks or rumors, but I never imagined he was so knowledgeable. Later, at the after-party, I found out he was also into my favorite anime and he shared lots of rare insights. From there, I, taken with Kyle, started reaching out and eventually, it led to us dating. Today marks our 2nd anniversary of dating. I want to be with you next year too, so how about we get married? Is this a proposal? Yeah, what else would it be? I just didn't expect you to say it so casually. Kyle was an odd guy, but he was a fun and comfortable presence for me, and I saw no reason to refuse. 2 years into our marriage, an opportunity, or rather, a golden chance, came my way. It was an incredible offer from my beloved older cousin Lisa. Lisa, who was 10 years my senior, had always doted on me since I was a child. Since we were both only children, we were still very close, like sisters. Her proposal was indeed marvelous, but it might have been too stimulating for us as a couple, or perhaps just for Kyle. I never expected that it would lead to such a conclusion. Starting next month, my husband's job is taking us abroad for 2 years. Sarah, why don't you live in our condo while we're gone? No way. I can't afford the rent for a place like that. Lisa's husband, John, has been successful with his business since he was young, and honestly, he's way richer than I could ever imagine. Lisa herself became an independent management consultant a few years ago and has been steadily increasing her profits. Sarah, you mentioned before that you can't seem to make more than $5,000 a month, right? Why don't you try living like a celeb for once? If you start taking that kind of environment for granted, you might just solve all your current problems in one go. I see, so you're saying to change my perspective on money. That's right. Our rent is $30,000, but if you're gonna live there, I'll let you have it for $6,000. How about it? My head spun. Even my current rent of $1,800 feels steep. But honestly, I really like our current place and don't want to let it go. But John says he's okay with renting it out to you as an investment. The owner of Lisa's condo is a friend of John's. Mr. Otomo is someone who supports entrepreneurs, so when Lisa brought up my story, he agreed right away. I get that it's a good offer, but can I discuss it with Kyle before I decide? Of course. I'll be looking forward to your response. At this point, I'd been running my salon for 5 years, but no matter how hard I tried, there's a limit to what I can do alone. I had almost given up on the idea that my monthly income would ever exceed $10,000. That's why the mere thought of the amount was already pressuring me. When I trudged home, my husband was into his new workout routine. I cautiously brought up Lisa's offer. Why not? It'd be a bigger space, and super close to work. Kyle, less concerned with overtime, worked as an in-house designer for a corporation. He's the type who wants to spend his time only on what he likes. Commuting from Lisa's condo would cut down the travel time significantly. But it'll be a bigger financial load than before, you know? It's for your growth, isn't it? I'm fine either way, so just work it out with Lisa. Even after marriage, my husband has been indifferent to anything outside his interests. Probably, except for the shorter commute, he isn't really interested in the details. Even as I explained the terms of living there and the rent, he just nodded, and I wondered if he was actually listening. After much thought, I decided to take on the challenge and moved in, agreeing to pay half the rent, $15,000, while my husband would cover the other half, and I'd handle all our living expenses. I was determined to gamble these 2 years on my life. Wow, this is amazing. That's incredible. That was our first reaction when we stepped into the high-end rental property. I thought we could actually live in the side closet for shoes, and the living room, which was over 430 square feet, seemed perfect for throwing a grand party. The standout feature was a white leather sofa in the vast space. We're told to use the furniture and appliances as they are, but they're all kinds I'd never afford in my life. It hardly felt like home. We had never even stayed in a hotel suite, so the place felt incredibly lavish, almost uncomfortably so. Now I understand what Lisa was talking about. If we get used to this environment, our perspective might really change. Yeah, indeed. And so, our life in a luxury condo began. Familiarity can be a frightening thing. Within 3 months, the place we used to tense up and started feeling like a sanctuary. It even changed my approach to work. Since we moved here for a reason, I started thinking about what we could do to take advantage of the location. I'm thinking of taking the plunge and hiring someone for my salon. I'm considering doing workshops or something with the extra time. That's what people have been requesting, right? If you want to do it, Sarah, you should give it a shot. I run a beauty-related social media account personally, and I had requests for a while to host workshops or tea parties where people could talk to me directly. Since then, it's been a trial and error process, learning and practicing every day. It was exhausting, but the results were well received, and before I knew it, I was easily making over $10,000 a month. I changed, but the environment also had a big impact on my husband, Kyle. In what way, you ask? His appearance changed. He probably thought it would be problematic for the neighbors if he continued to neglect his appearance. He's making sure his hair is neat and he's dressing sharper when he goes out. Although, as a result of getting ready to go out, the house ends up a mess. You know, I started getting approached by people at work who I've never talked to before. I bet. Even I think you look the best you ever have. The first year after we moved, our life was really going well. The dark cloud loomed when my mother-in-law, who found out about our new place through the New Year's cards, came to visit. She has a hobby of taking classes and has a lavish, vain personality. I was surprised when I saw the address. What an amazing house! I never imagined Kyle would move into a place like this. I'm so proud. My mother-in-law was as surprised as we were. Oh, this house is... right? I can step up when I need to, Kyle said, cutting me off, grinning as if he had rented the place himself. And then gesturing for me to be quiet with a finger to his lips. The class I attend is close by. It's easy to stop by on my way home, so I'll be dropping in from time to time. Sure, just make sure to let us know before you come over. I know that. I had a bad feeling about this. After retiring, my father-in-law enjoyed fishing with his buddies, often going on trips. Because of this, my mother-in-law started to come over to stay more often when my father-in-law was out. What bothered me was her sleeping on our white living room sofa. No matter how many times I told her, even laying out a futon on the floor, I'd find her sleeping on the sofa. Mother-in-law, please don't sleep on the white sofa, this is a rented place. Oh, sorry about that. It's just so comfy that I end up sleeping here without realizing. Initially, my mother-in-law was well-behaved like a guest, but gradually she started acting as if it was her own house. She was careless with the furniture and appliances, and I was constantly worried she might damage something. Hey, don't you think you're coming over too often, mother-in-law? This isn't our house, you should hold back a little. What? Let me enjoy it, too. This kind of lifestyle doesn't come around often. Plus, you've been asking me to clean the house every time I come, it's been handy for you, right? Kyle hadn't corrected the lie he told my mother-in-law. Since he started dressing properly, he's become really sloppy at home. Having my mother-in-law around to easily ask to tidy up must have been convenient for him. But the cleaning she was supposedly doing only happened at the beginning. Sarah, the house is a mess. Don't just sit there, vacuum the floor. The bathroom is soaking wet. When I got home from work, my mother-in-law was there more often, scolding me. Kyle was influenced by his mother and started blaming me, increasing my stress after coming home. Yet, since my father-in-law was often away from their house, I felt somewhat relieved that the situation couldn't get much worse. But as my mother-in-law's visits increased, another source of stress piled up for me. My husband has been coming home late. There are nights he comes back drunk in the middle of the night, or sometimes he doesn't come home until the morning. Occasionally, the smell of perfume lingers on him. When confronted, he says he's hooked on trying out new bars lately. Cut it out already. It's fine to go out for drinks, but coming home in the morning isn't normal. And how much are you spending on drinking anyway? I'm giving you enough for expenses, aren't I? How I use my money is my business. Just leave it be. I was shocked because he never used to talk like this. But there was something else I had to say. You've been wearing John's suits from the closet, haven't you? Do you think that's okay? What? You use Lisa's clothes and bags without asking, right? I was dumbfounded. Does he think it's okay to just use anything in the house as he pleases? I always get permission and take them to the cleaners afterward. Have you got permission from John? Well, you handle that part, make it sound good. John's suits are really cool. They fit me perfectly since we're about the same height, and I get a lot of compliments. I was furious. Of course, the suits of our landlord, who could afford such a nice house, would be stylish. If he ruined them, there's no way he could afford to replace them. Stop it. Stop it right now. Take care of what you've used and don't ever wear them again. Would you quit nagging? Seriously, you're so annoying. I'm in my prime for attracting attention. If you keep this up, I'm out of here. Divorce, I mean it. I felt as if a century-long love had gone cold. The man in front of me was no longer the husband I knew. But then, an unexpected event happened. My father-in-law had an accident while out fishing and passed away. Caught up with funeral arrangements, I had forgotten about these problems, but after the 49-day mourning period settled, my husband dropped a bombshell. I've decided to have Mom move in with us. I almost dropped my cup when my husband suddenly declared they would live with us. What? You can't just spring that on me. It's not possible here. Mom's really sad being all alone suddenly. So, I thought we'd live together for a while. But how can he decide that on his own? She'll move in next week. Next week? Why didn't you discuss this with me sooner? Sorry. But I thought you'd understand, Sarah. Gosh. I was upset by the sudden news, but if it's just for a short while, maybe it's bearable. I was worried about my mother-in-law who had just lost her husband. But the way my husband had decided on their living together without consulting me, I felt betrayed. The following week, to my surprise, my mother-in-law arrived with movers. What's all this about? This place is much more comfortable than my old house. I thought, why not, and sold the house to move here. What? Looking at my husband, he was grinning at me. I told you we were gonna have Mom move in, right? But I said it wasn't possible here. And you said it was only for a while. This house is big enough. One more person won't hurt. He had planned to live with his mother here all along. I didn't know what he had told his mother, but selling her own house to move in. I had a headache, and then my husband said something even more absurd. This is my house. You'll follow the head of the household's orders and take care of Mom. What? Head of the household? What are you talking about? This house is borrowed from Lisa, remember? Had he forgotten such an important detail? I know. But right now, who's paying the steep rent? Me, right? What? My husband has always been indifferent to money and possessions. But I never imagined he'd be so careless to barely remember details about this house. When he was single, Kyle lived in a cheap apartment that cost just $500 a month. So, I can understand why he'd think $3,000 a month for rent seems outrageously expensive. But did he seriously believe someone would rent us this property for such a price? If you can't listen to your husband, then pack up and leave. You've become so annoying with all your nagging lately. That's right. Thanks to Kyle, we're living this good life, and here you are complaining like an ungrateful spouse. I felt like I finally understood my husband's scheme. Ever since we moved into this house and started getting attention from everyone around us, he probably found my reminders about his spending habits and coming home late annoying. He's trying to kick me out without even realizing his massive misunderstanding. Fine, I'll leave. But are you sure that's what you want? Yeah, I'm done with you. I'm gonna live here with Mom. With Dad's inheritance and the money from selling the family home, we'll be just fine. I'll send the divorce papers to the salon later. So that's why he called his mother. I could have argued here, but I decided to let them face reality on their own, biting back my retort. I packed my things into a suitcase and silently left the house. This is a mess. Once outside the apartment, I sighed deeply and called Lisa overseas. What? No way I'm gonna let him treat my cousin like that. Just wait a month. Once I'm ready, I'll come back home. Lisa was furious with Kyle's actions and decided to return home half a year earlier than planned. About a month later, I received a call from Kyle. I had received the divorce papers right after leaving, but I knew this call wasn't about that. I thought about ignoring it, but the phone kept ringing. Reluctantly, I answered and heard, "Sarah?" Finally. The management company says the rent hasn't been paid. I've been making the payments as usual. Please, can you check with Lisa what's going on? Did you check the bank account? Yeah, it's got $3,000 in it. I almost burst out laughing. I hadn't made any deposits into that account, and I had withdrawn the balance after leaving the apartment. With just $3,000, you won't even cover the utility bills, let alone rent. How embarrassing it must be to live in a luxury apartment and have your electricity cut off. Why didn't you leave enough money in there? Huh? Why should I pay the utilities for a place I don't even live in anymore? He went silent, probably realizing the absurdity of his request. You have the day off tomorrow, right? I'll come over so we can talk. Yeah, sure. I'd appreciate it. He sounded deflated, even through the phone. That's what he gets for overstepping. I'll make sure he cleans up his own mess. The next day, I went to the apartment with Lisa, who had just returned from abroad. I could have used my key, but I rang the doorbell out of courtesy. It was my mother-in-law who answered. Yes, who is it? Sarah? Why are you back? Didn't you get a divorce? Yes, I did. I'm here to have you vacate the apartment. What? She was shocked, and Kyle showed his face behind her, looking guilty. He hadn't told her about the current situation yet. But the moment he saw Lisa standing behind me, his eyes widened. Lisa, you? Why are you here? I got a call from Sarah and had to come back to the States on short notice. Oh, this is Mr. Thompson, the owner and manager of this apartment. When we told him we were going to have a discussion, Mr. Thompson said he would sit in with us. As we entered the living room, I was shocked by what I saw, even though only a month had passed. The once lovely space looked like it had turned into a storage room. Boxes of my mother-in-law's moving items were piled up at the end of the living room, still unpacked. Lisa let out a small sigh beside me. When we all took a seat on the couch, Mr. Thompson was the first to speak up. So, about the rent for this month, when can I expect the payment? Well, I had deposited the usual $3,000 into the account, but it seems like it hasn't been withdrawn. My husband's face was pitiful as he spoke in a sweaty, murmuring voice. He had bed hair just like in the old days today. Did you seriously think it was $3,000? Didn't I ask you to pay just half of the rent at first? Remember? What? No way, half. You mean it's actually $6,000? I seem to recall something about half. Kyle's face looked shocked before he began to scratch his head frantically. I couldn't help but be a little impressed at his lack of memory regarding things he wasn't interested in. That's right, $6,000. But actually, the rent here is $30,000. What? What kind of figure is that? Maybe I only heard about the amount we were supposed to pay. He meant the amount he was supposed to pay, of course. Beside my husband, my mother-in-law also had her eyes wide open. What? What do you mean $30,000? This is the apartment Kyle was borrowing from an acquaintance, right? No. This apartment belongs to Lisa, whom I rent from. We had a 2-year lease, but decided to terminate it 6 months early due to this situation. My mother-in-law's face turned pale as she kept hitting Kyle's knee. What are we gonna do? I sold my house thinking Kyle was earning well. And I've been shopping a lot too. What are we gonna do? She started trembling with her hands covering her mouth. But she quickly turned back to Lisa and pleaded, Lisa, can Kyle and I sign a lease for $3,000? Just for half a year, I can't give up living here so suddenly. Lisa's mouth turned into a frown at my mother-in-law's brazen request. Look. Sarah, help me out here. You know what, you're welcome to move back in too. I felt my own mouth turning into a frown, just like Lisa's. I rented this place to support Sarah's hard work. I won't forgive anyone who tries to kick her out. Lisa turned her gaze to Kyle, who closed his eyes and looked down. But leaving this place was no longer just a simple matter. And to think, how carelessly you've treated things. This sofa, for instance, I can't even bring myself to use it anymore. Lisa frowned at the stains and dirt on the once pristine white leather sofa. I was planning to have you purchase the heavily worn items after 2 years, so I'll be doing a check now. What? Wait a minute. I wasn't informed about this. Kyle looked up, his voice sounding utterly ridiculous. You'd normally restore a rental to its original state before returning it. It's only right to compensate if you've misused the furniture and appliances we let you use. I'd explained this before, but considering he didn't even remember the rent, such details were unlikely to have stuck in his mind. Lisa walked around the apartment, checking everything. From the kitchen, I heard many sighs, so it was likely that the appliances would be up for purchase. Opening the bedroom closet, Lisa sighed even deeper. Kyle. Did you wear John's suits without permission? I didn't agree to lend you personal items. And, you've treated these quite roughly too. Sorry, but you'll definitely be buying these at the full price. Just as I thought. Despite being told not to wear them anymore. Every suit left in the closet was over $10,000. The only silver lining was that Kyle had only worn 3 suits. Kyle, I'm so disappointed in you. I trusted you with this house because of you and Sarah. I have no sympathy for someone who's hurt my dear Sarah. Kyle's face was ashen, shaking violently. The amount Lisa suggested for the purchases was substantial. And as if to drive the point home, Mr. Thompson began to speak. As for me, I'd like to ask you to pay this month's rent of $30,000, along with the cleaning fee for the room. The rent of $6,000 here is strictly under the contract with Sarah, not with you. And I need you to vacate the place as soon as possible. But, it's impossible to just leave like that. Sarah, please ask her on my behalf too. The mother-in-law, who had been downcast, raised her face and cried out loudly. Why should I? I've already submitted the divorce papers that Kyle sent, so we're strangers now. I have no obligation to help a stranger. Mr. Thompson looked at the mother-in-law with a pitying gaze, yet firmly presented the harsh reality. If you can't vacate immediately, I'll have to sue for illegal occupation. Why do I have to go through this? I can't stand this anymore. The mother-in-law screamed and stood up, then left the room. Kyle was stunned for a while as if his soul had left him, but then looked at me with a plea for help. Sarah. I'm sorry. I've finally woken up. I got carried away, thinking I was rich. I lost my mind. That's right. You seem to have come to your senses. Sorry, it really was all my fault. Let's start over from scratch in a new place. No matter what he said now, it no longer touched my heart. Our trust was broken, and I had also overheard that Kyle had been fooling around with other women. It's not gonna work. Like I said earlier, we're already divorced. Besides, even though I filed for divorce in anger, after a month, I have no regrets, and I've moved on completely. I looked back at my husband with a full smile. Seeing my face, he seemed to give up and asked in a quiet voice. You've been covering everything but half the rent, haven't you? By the way, how much are you earning now? I realized we hadn't talked about work in a long time. I've just started making over $16,000 a month. Looks like I might reach $20,000 by the end of the year. No way! Why didn't you tell me? Please, give us another chance. Kyle slid off the sofa and started crying, collapsing onto the floor. His hair still tousled from sleep. I wished he would remain that bed-headed boy no matter how much our standard of living had risen. Thinking this made me feel a bit sad, despite having thought I was over it. Soon after, perhaps scared by the mention of illegal occupation, they rented a monthly apartment and left. It seems they managed to pay off their debts with the inheritance from Kyle's father and by selling their family home, but their finances must be pretty tight now. Well, it's not that Kyle isn't earning badly, and if he lives within his means, he should be able to manage. After the divorce, Kyle contacted me just once to apologize. I have no intention of getting back together, but I genuinely wish him the best. He lamented then that it's hard to lower your standard of living once it's gone up, referring to living with his mother. Thinking about his mother, who enjoyed her hobbies and luxuries, I'm filled with worries about their future. I didn't ask for alimony from Kyle. Some may think it's too lenient, but I believe I was the one who changed the carefree man with the bed head. Being in that environment allowed me to adapt to a mindset that this lifestyle was the norm and helped me earn as much. Thanks to that, my endeavors are reaching new heights. But Kyle and his mother just used that environment to raise their standard of living, without realizing their delusion. Now, I live alone in a $3,600 rental. Though I'm not up to Lisa's level yet, I feel I've come a long way from the time when an $1,800 rent was a struggle. I believe in myself and want to continue making my dreams come true.